Hey, everybody, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the Device Talks Weekly podcast. Before I get into this week's episode, I did want to let you know we had a bit of a glitch on the old podcast channel. Some of the players didn't receive the podcasts that we put out last week. So I did send a note about this yesterday, but if you didn't see our Striker Talks that posted last week or last week's Device Talks Weekly, check your podcast players. They're on there now. Again, for some reason, something didn't happen that was supposed to happen, but we made sure it happened. So do check out those podcast episodes if you haven't done so already. So today, we're going to talk about supply chain. I had a fantastic conversation with two gentlemen from Boston Scientific. We spoke with Brad Sorensen, the Executive Vice President of Global Operations at Boston Scientific, and Paddy O'Connor, who's Vice President of Supply Chain at Boston Scientific. Some of you may have met Paddy O'Connor at DeviceTalks Boston. It's great to reconnect with him. And I spoke with them both about how Boston Scientific has been making adjustments to manage the supply chain crisis that not only came on during the lockdown and during the pandemic, but also we talked a bit about what some of the pressures were prior to that. They've had some really interesting adjustments that they've made, both with suppliers and internally with manufacturing. So I'm excited to bring you that conversation. Before we begin, though, I want to let you know we'll be talking supply chain and other great topics at Device Talks West. Please go to DeviceTalks.com to check out the agenda that we have there. It's happening on October 19th and 20th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. It would be fantastic to see you there. We'll have a lot of great companies presenting, including Boston Scientific. They'll be talking about their efforts in AI and work they're doing with IBM Research. But many, many other great companies will be there as well. So go to DeviceTalks.com to check out the agenda and, of course, to register. We'd love to see you there in Santa Clara. Now, to get our supply chain conversation started, I'd like to bring in our sponsor, Paxos. I'm speaking with Dwayne Hahn. Dwayne is Chief Strategy Officer and Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Paxos. Dwayne, please tell our listeners about Paxos.
Paxos is a closely held private company that's been in business for over 85 years now. We focus exclusively on providing the flexible packaging needs of healthcare companies around the world. Now, what do I mean by that? Many companies use pre-made pouches in the form of chevrons, header bags, three-side seal. Some use form-fill-seal equipment where they form a bottom web and have a peelable top web. Now, keeping in mind that all these have one thing in common. They're meant to be used in a setting where they're presented sterilely, and it's safe for the patient, safe for the doctor, safe for the nurse. So there's a lot of know-how that goes into that. A lot of people, I think, know what a pre-made pouch is. They know what a form-fill-seal package is. But unfortunately or fortunately, I guess it depends on how you look at it, there is so much regulation and understanding of what quality means to a quality product in the healthcare space that I think that's where companies like Paxos focus. We're 100% focused on what that actually means.
Fantastic. We'll hear more from Dwayne a little later in the podcast. If you want to find out more about Paxos right now, visit their website. It's Paxos, PAXXUS.com. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, is that you?
It is. I'm here.
Chris, it's me, Tom. I'm over here.
Hey, Tom. Hey.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
You have a beard? I don't remember that. Good gosh, it's been so long since I saw you and we talked. Well, welcome back, Chris Newmarker. I know we've had a couple of podcast episodes without this witty banter that I'm sure everyone just loves to bits and missed terribly while we were doing separate things.
Well, if they missed it, we're back.
We are back. We are back. You've got your Newmarkers Newsmakers.
Yes, I do. The Newmarkers Newsmakers.
Well, last time we talked, and we'll get into Newmarkers Newsmakers in a moment, we had talked about the state fair. Did you get to the state fair? Did you get your bucket of cookies?
You know what? It was so crowded. it was very crowded. Like the fair is back, man, and the line for cookies was extremely long. It was just like so after a long day schlepping around the dusty Minnesota State Fair with like a lot of people, it was like, yeah, well, mom and dad will make cookies at home soon.
There you go. They're cookies. You can get cookies in a lot of different places. Okay.
They are good. I mean, they do freshly baked. I mean,
I'm sure they're fantastic.
I'm not gonna. Yes.
Yeah, I do not want to get sued by the cookie people to suggest they are not the highest quality of cookie. I'm sure they are.
I'm sure a good chunk of our Minnesota listeners are gasping at us right now. Like you missed it. You walked. It's like the line was long.
Yeah, and you got little kids, and it's not a thing.
When they're older and they got a little more bark on them. Well, we'll wait for the. Then they'll be older too, and they'll eat all of them. So we're good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad you did make it to the fair. I'm sorry you didn't get the cookies, but
now one fun thing is, so I got to a concert last night. My wife and I went out and saw the National. Have you ever heard of the National?
I have not.
What? You haven't heard of the National?
Sorry, no.
Great band. But here's the thing. So I mean, we really, I think this was the key. We really liked them. We really got to like their music in the aughts. And we go to the concert tonight, and then we look up a review after we get back. And it was talking about how it was like everybody's favorite sad dad band.
Oh.
So, I mean,
are
we sad? Am I a sad dad?
I don't think you are. You seem like a jolly dad.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, but I guess they're a sad dad. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I hear it.
Man.
Well, I was
the old music. It's the music I liked when I was younger is becoming dad music.
We've been boy, sorry folks. We're going to go we'll take one more turn down tangent lane, but we were I was a Spotify guy until my son convinced me to switch to Apple Music, which we're doing now. And I still have Spotify. I'll see if I get rid of it. But I did find a playlist that said basically like dad music. I'm like, what's
dad
this?
Music? Yeah.
And I played it, and I'm listening to dad music while I'm working. I'm like, I liked every damn song. It's like, God damn it. Like they identified dad music. I just felt so infuriated, yet I enjoyed it immensely. So I guess dads do appreciate a certain sound.
It. Dad music's good. Come on,
it's good.
We're gonna vote.
All right. Well, let's not be sad dads anymore.
Right. We're not sad.
We'll be glad dads. We'll be happy dads. All right, we'll be glad dads.
There we go. That'll work. Glad dads. That's our
hashtag glad dads. Hashtag Newmarkers Newsmakers. What is number 5?
Make sure to check the hashtag because, make sure it's not something weird. Always a good social media practice.
That's a great point, Chris Newmarker. While you're doing number 5, I will see if there's already a glad dag that we do not want to be associated with.
Yeah, we're, always good to check.
Always good to check. What is number 5?
Well, number 5 on the list, we've got we've got some big news out of Edwards Lifesciences this week. They launched their next gen Sapien 3 Ultra Resilia TAVR, and and the other news we're talking on Thursday, and this was just today. They won FDA approval for their Pascal Precision transcatheter valve repair system. So they had this really cool news right before the TCT conference gets going over the weekend. Pascal Precision too. I mean, that's interesting because that's like for treating degenerative mitral regurgitation. So that's really like their bid to compete with Abbott and their MitraClip system. And I was actually just including some stuff from an analyst note commenting that some of the data at TCT they weren't expecting a head-on-head comparison between Pascal Precision and MitraClip, but it sounded like the analysts at Truist were at least hoping we could glean a few things about how Edwards' new system compares with Abbott's. So Edwards making some big moves this week.
That's fantastic.
TCT.
Yeah, no, this is really an exciting competitive space. I had a talk recently with someone about, and we'll have it on the Medtronic Talks podcast, about the drug-eluting stent sort of formation of the market 15 or so years ago. And this doesn't quite have that energy, but there certainly is a lot of horse racing going on in this space. So it's cool to see.
Definitely, like anything that involves being able to deliver implants of the heart via catheter versus cracking open somebody's chest. I mean, definitely if, Lord forbid I need that in coming decades, it'll be great if like all that kind of stuff is, available in a much, less invasive way. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, exciting to see that roll forward.
Right. Before we go on to number 4, I have looked up Glad Dads. It seems pretty benign.
There we go. All right, good. Well,
someone said, listening to James Taylor makes me feel like a father for some reason. All dads love James Taylor, which isn't true. I'm not a big James Taylor fan. Yeah. But it was hashtag Rad Dads, Sad Dads, Mad Dads, and Glad Dads. So
Glad Dads. All right. There we go.
What is number 4 in the Newmarkers Newsmakers? Glad Dad Newmarker?
Number 4 on the list, we've got Verily, receiving a $1 billion investment led by their Alphabet, parent company. And at the same time, like the Google, Google's sister company, announced, multiple leadership changes, including their founder, Andy Conrad, is now going to be the executive chair of the board, and they're promoting, current president, Stephen Gillette into the CEO role. Do you think I pronounced that right? It's Gillette?
I will go with Gillette.
Gillette?
Yes. We'll say Gillett, but it could be Gillette.
Yeah, sounds good. So he's getting promoted in the CEO role, and just showing that that it's actually, like, it's interesting. I mean, even when we got the article out, I noticed that on a recent episode of our podcast, I mean, you had Stephen Osterly on here, formerly of Medtronic, and he was saying that he was still all in on Google and Verily, because he said technology is the only logical way to deliver health care to a massive, fast-growing population. And this sure seems like the people over Alphabet and Google are very much in on this as well. And
Absolutely.
They're putting the money in. They're making some leadership changes as they plan to get they plan to expand Verily and its precision health business. So.
Yeah, he gave me a good verbal rap along my nose when I suggested that Verily was maybe a disappointment. He disagreed politely, but vehemently. So that was a good interview. Folks want to find that past episode, but no, I mean it's. I'm not betting against Verily, that's for sure. No, certainly not with $1 billion investment. So
I wouldn't bet against Google. They seem to know how to do these things.
They get some stuff figured out for sure. Yeah. All right. Let us move on to number 3 on the Newmarkers Newsmakers, Chris.
Hey, number 3 on the list, we've got Johnson & Johnson announcing a $5 billion share repurchase. This is the type of move that can help shore up the value of the company's stock. And the J&J CEO was talking about the company's strong cash flow, lowest level of debt in 5 years. Saying this was just a show of their confidence in the company. The one interesting thing that's happening at the same time that they're doing this is that they're engaging in a complex legal maneuver right now to shield themselves from potentially billions of dollars in lawsuit payouts related to women who claim that their baby powders caused cancer. So it's they're kind of trying to it's this legal maneuver we're seeing more companies doing, where they create LLCs, move the liability over to them. The LLC, files for bankruptcy, and right now, actually, there's a major appeals case involved with this, with what they're doing, and in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. And it sounds there's actually a recent Newmarker article about it. But it looks like it's going to be it could be a major case for corporate America. So they're doing these complex what appears to be controversial legal maneuvers around the talk litigation and at the same time they're doing a $5 billion share repurchase.
Certainly will be a practice to watch. Obviously, these sort of lawsuits aren't exclusive to medical devices or J&J. So for sure. All right, what is number 2 on the Newmarkers Newsmakers?
Number 2, we've got Smith and Nephew announcing a positive data around their Regeniten bioinductive implant. It's this is for rotator cuff repair, but it's it's an implant that is meant to like encourage the body's natural healing process to kind of like change the course of tear production, progression, in the shoulder. So get it to return to normal activity. So a lot of interest in this. This is one of the most read stories on MassDevice this week. So some positive data. They're moving forward with the technology.
Fantastic. Well, this is as an aging person, I am all for anything that will make repairing shoulders easier, because my right shoulder is really starting to bug me a lot. And let's figure this out for Tom. Let's do it for Tom.
I've noticed a bit of knee aching occasionally sometimes, Here we go.
Yeah. Hashtag ouch dad. Yes, for sure.
Glad dads.
What is number one on the Newmarkers Newsmakers, Chris?
Number one on the list. Well, number one on the list, I mean, we have our Big 100 report, our MedTech Big 100 report is now out in full on medical design and outsourcing. There's a link on the homepage. This is one of the biggest projects we do all year. Big project, Big 100. It's the 100 largest medical device companies in the world. We've got data on annual revenue, employee numbers, R&D spend, descriptions of all the companies, headquarters, and we're spinning out all of this content around it, including a really good story that our senior editor Danielle Kirsch put together. And we posted this one on MassDevice because MDO is more of a technology website. MassDevice is more of a business website. So we have a story on MassDevice about the 10 largest medtech employers, and we're kind of saying like, what do their employees really think? We looked at reviews posted on Glassdoor, and we kind of found like a lot of the reviews actually employees were actually expressing that they're happy to be part of companies that are working on life improving, life saving technologies, and then of course we've got some of the complaints you'll get from people when they work for really large corporations, talking about bureaucracy or whatnot. But if you're you can satisfy your curiosity by going to MassDevice and looking up the 10 largest medtech employers and what their employees really think. You can find out who the largest companies are by employment, and you can get some nice quotes from Glassdoor about the pros and cons that people say around working at the different companies.
Yeah, and some of these are again, these are anonymous comments about workplaces. So put the value into them that you want, but they seem like they're coming from the heart, and they're interesting to sort of get another look. We talk obviously with a lot of the senior executives of these companies about culture and things like that. They may see things one way from the top looking down, but it's interesting to see how those who are the recipients of this leadership, how they see things.
Exactly. So, what do the rank and file really think? Yeah.
If I were in charge, I would certainly be taking a close look at these comments and taking a measure. And I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are. Yeah.
It's probably one of the reasons why the page views are up for it. So
I would. Yeah. Yep. I think I'm probably contributing a lot to it too. It's just it's fascinating.
Thank
reading.
you, Tom.
Yes. I'm sure I'm not the only one though, but it's certainly good to go through this and get again a different perspective on these companies. So great job by Danielle.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Really cool.
My gosh.
Huge project. Yeah. This was a real team effort. Like all of Danielle, takes the lead, especially on getting the data, the initial data all together, every year. But, really like, this is really like the whole editorial team, like pitching in to get this together, the full Big 100 report. So, which is
another reason that you were not on our recent podcast.
Yes.
Because you've been neck deep in this as well. So, good job to your team, Chris Newmarker.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Before we begin this keynote interview with the folks at Boston Scientific, I'd like to bring back our sponsor, Paxos. I'm talking with Dwayne Hahn. Again, Dwayne is Chief Strategy Officer and Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Paxos. Dwayne will be talking about the impact of supply chain challenges on Boston Scientific. How has Paxos been impacted by these challenges, and how have you responded?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yes, certainly we've been impacted. It's impossible not to be over the last 2 years with the multiple force majeure events impacting resins, wet chemicals, adhesives. The global supply chain challenges with foil is obviously well documented. And on top of that, we have all the logistics challenges with air freight, shipping, and truck. So there's been many opportunities to improve. So what have we done specifically? I think it starts with your understanding of healthcare packaging and what quality means and what can be done to move on the fly, to think differently. We're heavily involved in many of the industry organizations, SPMC, FPA, ASTM, AMI, ISO, very long list. What does that mean? It means that we can move quickly to offer solutions with our customers and point them in a direction that allows them to get the technical data they need and to make the submission to the FDA that they may need to do in many situations. So being a closely held private company without metrics to worry about inventory turns really puts us in a strong advantage over periods like this.
That's great. We'll hear a little more from Dwayne Hahn and Paxos a little later in the podcast. Well, Brad Sorensen and Paddy O'Connor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
So we're gonna talk a lot about supply chain in this episode, which is actually great. I mean, I joked that supply chain was a lot like Major League umpiring. It was, if you didn't hear about it, you knew it was going well, and things were going smoothly. But it's always been an area of interest of mine, just sort of the behind the scene actions of how we get what we need to get to live our everyday lives. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Before we get into all that juicy stuff, though, I'd love to understand how you both got into this field. Brad, why don't you start us off? How did you get into medtech and find your way into sort of the supply chain side of things?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, my initial game plan was to be an actuary.
That's a first for the podcast, Brad. I'll tell you that.
Doesn't seem very strategic, but I was enrolled in a master's program to get a master's in risk management, and they canceled the program. And I got a job, and I was in grad school, and I had a son on the way, and so I pivoted to the MBA program and kind of got sucked into the supply chain side of the world, and that was 30 years ago. And I've spent almost my entire career in supply chain, from everything all across the whole kind of plan, source, make, deliver, service continuum. Had different roles. But I like to say strategically, I went into supply chain, but when I did it, nobody even knew what it was.
Yeah, that's great. And you started at Boston Scientific, right?
I actually started at an ammunition company making shotgun shells and that type of stuff. And then I came to Boston Scientific in 96.
Oh, that's a good pivot, I think. Yeah.
I think it was a good career move.
Yeah, for sure. And Paddy, how about you? What was your path to where you are today?
Yeah, maybe a little more traditional. I'm an engineer by trade, mechanical engineer. And, back it was 94, I left college. I joined a company called Lake Region, now Integer Holdings. So a wonderful family-owned company at the time. You leave college, you apply to 20 different places. You don't know what you're going to do. Back then, it was cool in Ireland to join Intel or kind of the technology field. I ended up in a small med device company. It was a startup. It just got in my blood. I left after a few years to, following love up to the city, my girlfriend, now wife, I guess. But I ended up working in Aer Lingus, fixing airplanes, which, what young engineer didn't find that cool. I worked in Intel, processing chips, but I never found what I was looking for. And when I got the opportunity to join Boston Scientific in 98, getting back into the med sector, I haven't looked back, and I've been with the company ever since.
So was the transfer or move from engineer to supply chain, did you immediately get into supply chain, or did you take an engineering role and then find your way into the supply chain side of things?
No, I took an engineering role. I was production soup. I grew up in the make function for many years. The nice thing, though, in our world, about 15 years ago, I started running a plant. And, the nice thing there, you have many more elements of the supply chain. So we had sterilization and distribution on site, so very connected to the customer. So that was a great role to get a good view of the full supply chain. And then I work in Brad's organization, so now running supply chain for Boston Scientific. Before this role, I had an opportunity to run kind of distribution, customer service, or planning organization. So kind of got more formal kind of training, I guess, in the breadth of supply chain. And again, maybe against wasn't really what I was wanting to do, but kind of in hindsight, see the value of spending time in those verticals to round out. And truly, I think that, the organizations today that can call themselves end-to-end organizations, and I won't say we would call ourselves that yet, we certainly aspire to it. It's going to take leaders working in all those verticals and having those experiences to be able to see all the way through supply chains, in my view. So I was just very fortunate with the set of experiences I got.
I actually think Poddy's underselling it a little bit. When asked is maybe not a strong enough term. When I asked Poddy to take over distribution and planning, I think his first response is, "There's no way I want to do that." And I remember telling him, at the time I was running global supply chain, and I said, if you want to sit in this seat, you got to do this job, because you have to understand how this whole thing goes end to end. And he was in it for a few months before he came back. He said, "Okay, I see it. I get it." Originally, it was I had to put him in a bit of a headlock.
I'm sure he doesn't hold a grudge, right, Poddy? It's all forgiven then.
It's not the first headlock, and likely won't be the last.
So let's take a look at at where we are today with supply chain. Let's go back first to sort of when the challenges first started to emerge. I think everyone connects it to the pandemic. Poddy, you were at DeviceTalks Boston. I think we had talked that even before that, there were some weak links that were showing up after some hurricanes and such. But when did the strain really begin to become on the supply chain really begin to become visible? Well, Brad, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right, Tom. Supply chain has always been it's a very connected kind of ecosystem all the way through, from planning your products to, making them, to sourcing them, to delivering them, to servicing them. But historically, maybe 5 years ago, you could kind of really bifurcate those pieces or maybe trifurcate them, right? Focus a lot on the planning, get your forecasts right. Then when you want to go source, you can find companies that can make it, and they've got it, and they'll ship it to you. And then you just need to make it, which is, if you need people, you go hire people, and then, you ship it around the world. I would say probably over the last, probably 3 years pre-pandemic, we started to see some signs of supply chain challenges. That showed up in places like sterilization, where there was massive consolidation in the industry, which started to take capacity out. Right? We saw a couple, you mentioned the hurricane, right? We saw a couple of, big, broad natural disasters. I mean, the hurricane in Puerto Rico wiped out a lot of the medical device industry on that island for quite a while. Luckily, we were in front of a lot of that with some investments we had made. We've always been really focused on being resilient. And so we were back up and running within a couple of weeks, but a lot of the industry wasn't so lucky. I go back 5 years, maybe ago, I've got presentations around, hey, here's the upcoming storm in the electronic component space, where we were seeing consolidation of chip manufacturers. We were seeing, iPhone sales and Android sales explode and sucking up more and more chips and more smart, your fridge can talk to you. And we started to see some of those pockets emerge. And at that time, we realigned the way that we source components. But then COVID kind of just threw the deck of cards up in the air, where, those places where there was fragmentation, those suppliers that were maybe on the, the edge of competitiveness just started to leave the industry. And then you roll on top of that fundamental distribution challenges, which have really kind of manifested during COVID. Previously, if you wanted to ship something somewhere, you could ship it. Once commercial airplanes stopped flying, that game changed fundamentally. So it's been changing some for the last probably half decade, but the last 2 years have, really accelerated that, in my opinion.
Well, Poddy, I'd love to understand how that affects your sort of day-to-day work. How many fires do you deal with? By fires, I hope I don't mean actual fires, but sort of challenges do you deal with? Is it one a day? Is it one a week? Is it 5 a day? Is it 5 an hour? I mean, how often are you finding sort of yourself having to pivot or find a new solution because there's been a shortage here or there? And is that number trending up, trending down, staying steady? We'll take a quick break for our final installment with Dwayne Hahn of Paxis. Dwayne, we're learning a lot of lessons about supply chain challenges. How do you see the supply chain for healthcare evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, certainly it's evolving. With all the risk and uncertainty, the traditional models of Kanban and just-in-time have proven to be problematic. I think the most valuable lesson learned is people's lives matter, and that in order for the supply chain to change, we have to spend a little bit more money as an industry. And for many of us, what that means is changing the way we operate and being willing to change, specifically building up large safety stocks, holding on to inventory. It just comes down to that. It's really that simple, Tom. As in the end, the most impactful part of what's happened is understanding the importance of patient lives. And that, yes, there is a cost to changing the way we manage supply chain, but the people we love, our friends and family, and their health far outweighs the cost of fixing this challenge and what de-risking actually means.
Excellent. Thanks, Dwayne Hahn, for joining us on the podcast, and thanks to Paxis for sponsoring this episode of the DeviceTalks weekly podcast. If you'd like more information about Paxis, go to their website. It's paxis.com. That's PAXSUS.com. I mean, how often are you finding sort of yourself having to pivot or find a new solution because there's been a shortage here or there? And is that number trending up, trending down, staying steady?
So, we have probably just under 20,000 UPNs, many families. So I would say big fires where I'm on calls like, hey, we need to talk about this. There's probably a new one every week or two. But what's under the water in the plants, in the sourcing organization, they're probably, for every one I see, there's probably 100 more, would be my guess, that the team are knocking down and dealing with. And doing a phenomenal job. And I think if anyone is listening, like the thanks, the appreciation you have for the organization, in our world, but probably every supply chain professional, what they've been doing over the last 2-3 years, dealing with, the fires, as you call them, is just phenomenal. So luckily I only have that amount to deal with, like, one a week, I would say. Now, they're pretty big ones and very impactful. So we review all the fires, at least all the ones that have a meaningful impact. We pivot our business, how we run our business, like Brad. But post-pandemic, when the pandemic hit first, we went to like daily calls for an hour every day, like 6 p.m., what's going on. And those early days were around, safety and protocols, and we didn't really feel the wave of supply chain challenges. They started 6 months, probably later as we were kind of firing back up, and suddenly labor became a problem. But thankfully, we're pretty vertically integrated, so a lot of that problem was our own. So we kind of got through that, muscled through that. But today, as you said, it is about component supply and the ecosystem that feeds us. And I would say, I don't think it's changing, but it's probably getting more focused. There might be maybe less issues, and maybe I'm going to touch some wood here, but they tend to be bigger and harder to solve. I would say would be the trend I'm seeing versus, all the plates we'd spinning a year ago. We deal with one, knock it down, deal with one, knock it down. Now it's like the problems are harder, especially because it's getting a lot more focused on the microelectronics, as longer lead times. I would say that, I don't know if that characterizes it well for you.
No, it does. And that's a great point. That I said, how many do you see? You're at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. I'm sure there are many that gets resolved before they reach the top. So that's a good point. Brad, what has Boston Scientific done to move through this, to avoid more fires? What have your solutions look like? Are you making connections with more suppliers? And I'm sure there's a multiple pronged strategy, but let's maybe go over a couple. What has been your approach to finding solutions for these challenges?
Yeah, I would maybe characterize, maybe 3 big ones. One, around sourcing and supplier management. We've been on a path for a number of years to try to consolidate the number of our suppliers, right? I mean, we live in a medical device space, right? Making life-saving devices. And as such, there is a lot of specificity, a lot of high reliability that's required, and frankly, a lot of hoops that suppliers have to jump through that they may not have to jump through selling to a commercial company. So as such, we need to develop relationships that are long-term. We've got, in the neighborhood of 12 to 1,300 direct material suppliers. Take that times probably, 10x the number of different sites that they might manufacture at. And we've been looking to drive that down. We've continued to organize our commodity teams and to move to more strategic suppliers. In addition, we've started to reach more directly into our supply chain suppliers we used to call tier 2. So we would buy from a distributor or from someone who did a sub-assembly for us. Now we go direct to the supplier, again, because we need to make sure we've got that relationship in place. As Paddy said, we're highly vertically integrated. That's been good for us, I think, in the supply chain world, in these challenges, relatively speaking, because we own a lot of this. The downside is that means we might be buying lower value, just from a pure dollar perspective component, from suppliers, which means the leverage we create with them almost has to have an emotional aspect. Hey, remember what we do for a living. We're not making, we're not selling stuff at, the local toy store here. We're making devices that save people's lives. So we've realigned how we source, who we source from, and those strategic relationships. 2 is really to deal with what has truly been a global labor shortage. It's been more acute in the US, but it's hit us everywhere. Part of that was, just general wage inflation. Although we don't like the cost of that per se, that's relatively easy to deal with, right? You give people raises and, at least the supply continuity problem goes away. The bigger issue is, however, that we used to, if we wanted to hire 200 people because we had capacity growth that we needed, we'd just put an ad in the paper and do an open house and we could hire them. That's not the case anymore. Frankly, just getting enough people to work has been difficult. So we've undertaken a very aggressive path to really try to remove the human labor dependency for things that machines can do. As an example, 30-ish% of our people look through microscopes every day and make a go, no-go decision. Is this product good? They inspect it, et cetera. Automated machine learning has really moved the ball on a machine's ability to do that. And quite frankly, that's probably not the most rewarding work that our workforce is doing anyway. So we've started to put in more automation in those type of places to augment our direct labor capability. And in parallel, undertaking a dramatic change management approach through a program we call GROW, which is really around upskilling our direct labor, creating a better career path in places that have more value add. And then finally, we've been retooling our entire distribution network. So where we build product, how we ship it. Historically, we would build centers of excellence, build product in one site, and it would feed the rest of the globe. But with the challenges of distribution and the cost increases in distribution, we started to go to more dispersed technologies across the globe so that we're building locally, so that we can source more locally, so we can ship more locally. I wouldn't confuse that with kind of just-in-time mentality, which used to drive to that, which I think oftentimes was very much more expensive. Mm-hmm. This is really about, just the pure time and effort it takes to ship something from Minnesota to Malaysia is prohibitive for supplying the overall world demand. We actually started moving some of that capability around the world so that we've got it where we need it.
Well, that's interesting, and that's a lot to unpack. Let's start with the sourcing. You mentioned consolidating suppliers. I thought an approach was to actually add to your list of suppliers, have a lot of backup and a lot of duplicates. This sounds like this is, if I'm understanding my English correctly, that you've gone in the other direction and really reduced the number of suppliers you have. Am I reading that correctly, Paddy? Maybe you can expand on that?
Yeah, no, you heard correctly. So the point is building like strategic partnerships with your supply base. You're kind of in it together. Therefore, So when the chips are down, that you can rely on them and actually create value together. Peace times, as we say. In the moment, it is truly about supply. So there, of course, is places where we'd like to have redundancy. There's places where we don't have it today, we'd like it. There's places where we do have it, that we're glad we have it. So that's certainly a part of it as well. But in general, I guess our philosophy is less is more, especially if they're really good partnership suppliers.
And what are the characteristics of someone you'd want to enter into that relationship with? Is it a certain size, a certain number of facilities? What does a typical partner like that look like?
Well, there's definitely a piece of like size in the sense of absolutely confident, ongoing concern, like a growing, stable organization. I think there's a piece where we're both collectively invested in what we're trying to do, that we value improvement programs, VIP, so kind of shared cost saving efforts, so that we're working together on generating value, trying to take some cost out. Obviously, if there's a quality concern, that you can pick up the phone and collaborate really well with respect to what happened, what changed, what we can do to improve. So to me, they're the kind of characteristics of someone it's like dealing with someone on the inside that you just partner up and call and collaborate.
Interesting. And you mentioned that you have some areas where maybe you'd like some redundancies. Are you still talking to suppliers? If someone's listening to this, should they think that Boston Scientific is all set, or that you're definitely worth engaging them and there's a possibility to become one of those strategic suppliers?
Yeah, I would say we're not all set. I would say it's a dynamic world. We're always launching new products. There's always opportunity to work with us, both for existing and new. So yeah, that's just a very dynamic world we live in. As you know, we mentioned that we have lots of different products. We launch lots of new products every year. Where there's acquisitions, there's a lot of activity in that space. So our supply chain is pretty dynamic. So by definition, our supply base is going to be dynamic.
So we'll include your cell phone number in the podcast notes. Is that all right?
You'll get me on Instagram quicker.
So sometimes redundancy, just for the sake of redundancy, is actually kind of like a false sense of security. What we would love to have everywhere is, essentially two strategic suppliers who are both in the mix and who can, offset each other if one of them has a challenge. Worst case scenario is you got a single supplier and they're not a good strategic partner. Next better is having a single supplier who is a strategic partner. And then best is having a couple good strategic partners who we can kind of share the risk with, if you will.
That's a great point. Well, let's talk about the labor part of things. Brad, you mentioned the adoption of technology. Is there enough opportunity there in bringing in automation and technology to offset the demand you have in labor, or is it sort of just scratching the surface?
No, we actually think so. I mean, I would say today we are early on, but we're making some really good progress, both through automated visualization, the use of cobotics, so collaborative robots who are working right in concert with our product builders or technicians or engineers on the line. We think that there's substantial opportunity here, right to the tune of, called, a third of our labor force could be augmented. And the high quality problem we have is if you look at our growth potential and our growth forecasts, that this automation we're driving and this increased use of different capabilities doesn't result in, okay, now we're good news. We brought in a bunch of automation. Hey, let's lay off 500 people. How do we continue to manage our growth without having to add 500 people who we probably couldn't find? And the benefit of that is we get the team on the bus with us, right? There's no pushback. Hey, robots are trying to take my job away. I get it. You're going to try to do the part of my job that I don't particularly love doing every day and give me stuff that's way more interesting and exciting so I can grow. So we think it's pretty dramatic. And in some parts of the organization, we've made big leaps forward. Right? We've been able to essentially, hold labor flat while we've been seeing, 15 to 20% increase in output.
Wow. It's amazing to me how quickly we've sort of gotten there from, it's only been a few years from robots are going to steal my job to someone's going to do this. If it's a robot, that's fine. It's just, I don't know if it was the pandemic or if the robotic technology has improved such that all these options are available, but we're definitely in a spot now where people see the necessity, including autonomous trucks at some point. I'm sure that's going to be a godsend. Yeah. And Patty, let's go back to the distribution. If this is your area, sort of the building plants across the globe or different areas where they're needed, that sounds like a huge undertaking. How far along are you in getting to where you need to be in managing that? And what does that look like? Are you partnering with a local facility that's already existing and suddenly becomes like a licensed Boston Scientific site? Or are you physically building sites and starting from scratch? What does that process look like?
Largely, it's leveraging footprint we have. There will be additions, as you know, there's long lead times associated with that. But, the good news is we have plants in LATAM and in the US and Europe and in Asia. So we kind of have a dispersed footprint and concentrated in those four big areas. So what we're trying to do is move products within our existing footprint, which is faster, more cost effective, and leverages the capabilities we have today. So although, as Brad said, we are growing as well. So we are looking at where else in the world we should be doing business and then thinking, through the lens of all our learnings the last 2 years, how does that inform those decisions? But right now it's kind of leveraging the footprint we have. But I would say, though, it goes beyond that. I think someone famously once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. With respect to kind of distribution in our world of med devices, they tend to be smaller, higher value type products. So as Brad said, most have moved around the world in the bellies of aircraft. And as we think about, our ESG commitments and where we're going, both as a company, as a society, we take this super seriously. And actually, I see the moment we're in today as a catalyst to make progress in that space. And to me, I'm super excited about that. As we think, not just about how we move product between A and B, because sometimes we go A, B to C. Can we just go straight from A to C? What does that mode look like? Why, maybe inventory isn't the most important metric anymore, and we leverage some investment that creates value with respect to both cost and the environment. When we think about carbon footprint, it's becoming a more standard measure. It's in our company. We're really trying to be serious about that, and I think it'd be great when industry catches up with some standards in that space, that we can all kind of play in that space on a level playing field, which I think will come. Mm-hmm. But we're not waiting. We're moving with rapid speed as to how we can rewire how we deliver product as well, up to and including how we kind of package and configure product, so that we ship it in the smallest possible container that's recyclable, that has EDFUs. But that's a real living program that we're super jazzed about. It was on our work list and we were working on it. But I think the pandemic has helped us to kind of double down and really go at it with conviction. So, outside of all we believe personally with respect to the environment, and, and I personally believe we need to change as a humanity in that space, and we need to do our part. I'm super excited about what we're doing and what we can do in this space.
That's great. That's another great point. Brad, so are you able to share any sort of success stories where you faced a challenge and that you were able to overcome and were able to get products out to the folks who needed them?
Yeah, without going into detailed specifics, I can tell you I've got a couple examples from electronic space, and obviously there's a global electronics shortage. You see it, everything from major manufacturers, auto manufacturers saying, hey, we're going to stop building cars for a month, to you can't open the Wall Street Journal without seeing an article about electronics shortages. We've had, frankly, probably a handful of places where we were told these components were just unattainable, and the lead time moved from 6 weeks to 50 weeks. And based on some of the strategic relationships that we've developed with suppliers, based on the fact that we've started to create more direct relationships with people that were used to be tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, based on our connection into industry forums, et cetera, we leveraged some of those relationships and went out and talked to some of these first tier suppliers, the chip manufacturers themselves, and talked very frankly. Here's what our purchase order was, but here's what we really need, right? We need this by this date, or this number of patients will be impacted. And we have spent the time to explain to them what our products do, how they impact lives, right? What the actual health care impact of that would be. And we've been largely successful, right? Not 100% successful, but successful in a number of spaces where, to put things in context, right? We're saying, hey, we need 38,000 of these components for, here's our purchase order to cover us for the next year. And they came back and they said, tell us what it takes so we don't impact patients, which means they're getting it, right? Our message has got through to them. They are a partner, and we say, we need 4,000 of these, 6 weeks from now. And, senior level executives in those organizations said, okay, you've got my commitment. You will get 4,000 units. We will talk to other customers who we know are taking this for inventory. We'll give you 4,000 of them, and we'll keep you alive. Now, when we sit and look at inventory reports, it continues to be red because, we don't have the 6 weeks of safety stock we'd like. We got 2 days, but we've gotten commitment. Hey, they'll keep us running so that we can continue to provide products for our customers and our patients. As I said, we're not betting 100% in that world because sometimes they're just pure physics of here's how long it takes for, kind of the gestation period for those products to flow through. But where they've been able to find available inventory and divert potentially just to help us, we've had good progress. And I think it's, my dad used to always say, and I've heard other people say it, the time to make a friendship is not when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
We've built these relationships, and then, we're calling, and I think we've done a good job being honest, saying, yeah, we'd like 38,000 so we're covered for a year, but what we need is 4.
Mm-hmm.
Got to give us 4. That's the no kidding around impact to patients. And our suppliers, for the most part, have responded. I think have appreciated our honesty there.
That's great. Patty, anything come to mind with that question?
Yeah, I've got several, but one that's totally different to the one Brad brought up. Early in the pandemic, kind of goes back to the labor challenge. We had a plant in the Midwest that had some, just Costa Ricans working there from just interplant transfers. And labor was becoming a challenge. And one of the guys, an awesome dude, came up with this idea, well, why don't we hire native Spanish speakers? It's like only Spanish speakers. So when we think about the hurt the pandemic brought to a lot of folks that, the hospitality industry, where people were working in different industries that were devastated. And then kind of the bringing together of that challenge and our challenge, and pivoting to, well, why don't we designate 3 lines? Let's use our friends in Costa Rica to rewrite all our kind of documentation in Spanish. And within about we had a couple of shifts up and running in no time. Like the word of mouth in that community really helped. And I think that is growing to be like a standard stable in that organization. And about probably 25% of our workforce are only Spanish speaking. And it's created it's Midwest. So interesting collision of cultures, but it's just phenomenal to see how it's come together, and each different community learning off each other. We're giving Spanish classes to supervisors and engineers and anyone else that wants to learn. It's just a huge kind of solving 2 problems in the moment. Super program.
That's fantastic. Let's look forward a bit in terms of acquisitions. Boston Scientific's been a very acquisitive company over the last couple of years. How involved are you both in, or are your areas involved in assessing the supply chains and the supplier lists of acquired companies? And is that something that can factor into whether a deal gets done or not? Brad, maybe you can kick it off.
Yeah, it absolutely does factor in, and we are intimately involved. Every deal that we do, the supply chain assessment is one of the most critical aspects, right? Clearly the revenue opportunity, quality performance of the company, and synergies we can get in supply chain. I mean, maybe our M&A team I'm probably missing 1 or 2, but those are kind of the big 4 in my mind. And as we look at acquisitions, typically they've got a challenge in one of those 4, and oftentimes in the supply chain space. If a company is looking to be acquired, it's because they've got a cool technology that has some opportunity, and maybe they don't have the sales force, or they haven't built it for scale, because you don't get a huge incremental return. You don't get to sell your company for 50% more if you got a great supply chain, right? You sell it because of the fantastic market opportunity, And then people like us come in and, fix the supply chain. And so we are intimately involved in assessing it up front. And there are cases where we've said, we can't fix this on the timeline we need to. We're not going to do the deal. But I would say more times than not, as we get in and assess it, our perspective is, okay, here are the things we need to do to fix it. And one of the common tenets for that for us is no negotiation around whether or not the organization be integrated. We acquire a company, we integrate it, full stop, period. That's the way we operate. Mm-hmm. Tell people day one. And the benefit we get from that is we get some of the unique capability, product, process knowledge that company brings with it, but we bring the power of our systems, our tools, our relationships, and immediately out of the gate, they might have a supplier list of 600 suppliers. We look at it and say, good, 150 of these are already our strategic partners. We go to them and say, move them to the top of the list. With the rest of us, they're now one of us, right? It's like being in the mob. They're a friend of ours. So you got to treat them like that. And then the others, we look at and say, is there unique capability here where we have to bring that supplier into our network, into the fold? And frankly, there are probably, 30 to 40% where we say, you know what, not a supplier we want to stay with for the long term. Here's our strategy to move it to one of our partners. But we do it literally out of the gate because as we bring products in, it typically is expanding, in a category that we're already in or entering a new category. And just the sales capability we'll bring to the table will accelerate their growth beyond what they had scaled their supply chain for up to that point.
Great. Patty, anything to add to that? Or
the only thing I'd add is that, as Brad said, we take it very seriously. So, once we get through the deal or rolling, we see the integration part as a real important step, and hence we centralize some of that capability. Not a massive team, just like 20 or 30 folks that sit centrally. Our supply chain organization is 20,000+ people. So taking 20 or 30 people with real key competencies that we can leverage so that we can accelerate that integration. Because with every one, we always look back and said, that was awesome. I wish we went even faster. And we find that capability. There's a lot of rinse and repeat. They're all different, but a lot of the processes are rinse and repeat. So, but why not take those things and make it easier and repeatable? And then we deal with the nuance of the technology, the idiosyncrasies of the ramp, or whatever that might look like, challenges. So it's always a fun place to be working in, is in the integration, something new. You get to meet new people, new technologies, you learn something new. It's always interesting.
And maybe, Tom, I would just anecdotally, right? I actually cut my teeth in this space 15 years ago. This was part of my job. We'd buy a new company, I'd go in and help integrate it. And we've called that group Instant Offense for quite some time. But we don't do it like, it's not like getting assimilated into the Borg here. We go in and we try to provide, hey, here's the construct. We're clear about we're going to integrate, but we pull that team in and we say, here's our roadmap. Here's the path. If you want to be on the path with us, fantastic. But this is the path. And I have heard multiple times, and there's no reason for sometimes people who are even, a site we might be closing have said, I've been involved in 3 acquisitions. Boston Scientific is as good at this as anybody I've seen. I think this is a real strength of ours. There's no gray area. We walk and say, here's our game plan. Here's what we want to do, right? We're here to help you do that, but this is the path we want to run on.
I would imagine if you do that sort of stuff well, it just makes those deals easier to do. You just realize value more quickly, and things just sort of come together faster for everybody. So it's a
competitive advantage.
Yeah, for sure. So final question, Patty, you can start us off. You mentioned a little bit earlier sustainability and using recyclable materials and ESG. One would think that in a crisis or difficulty or a challenge, whatever we want to call this period, that stuff might get tossed to the wayside. Like, I just got to get the job done. How is sustainability sort of factored into what you're doing, how you're moving forward in supply chain?
Yeah, I think, sometimes you could say to yourself as a natural starting point, would those be in conflict? I think exactly the opposite. I think they work absolutely hand in hand. So if all you care about is money and cost, then the good news is, like, putting things on the ocean versus in the air is much less expensive. Not as inexpensive as it used to be, but compared to air, much less expensive. When you look at carbon footprint, it's 30x less of an environmental impact. So how do you wire your network to make that true and still have the agility and service needs for your customer base? But so what needs to be true in your supply chain with respect to how you pack product, how you set up your lanes, how you think about your manufacturing locations versus your markets. So to me, it's just mindset and the amount of wins in this space. So, and what I was talking about earlier was bringing to life, more environmental packaging. Like, the industry, you walk into an OR or a hospital, all you see is fancy, shiny boxes, and one is shinier and fancier than the next. But they're not all recyclable because we use these fancy labels. So how about we change the industry that, we ship edible boxes for kicks and giggles, but certainly recyclable ones that truly make a meaningful difference to kind of the hospital waste. So when we think about the ecosystem of healthcare, we're all in it together, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. We're scope 3 for someone else and vice versa. So the suppliers, the manufacturers, the healthcare providers, we all have to work together. So, and we're going to have to think differently. But honestly, there's absolute wins in there for everyone, whether you care about the P&L or the environment. They need to go together.
Great. And Brad, just final sort of overview point. We talked about a lot today, how you're changing your relationship with suppliers, introduction of new technology to make up for or compensate for labor difficulties, where you're building your distribution sites. We're talking about sustainability. You're going through a lot of changes. What does this process look like coming out? Do you have like a plan? This is what we're going to look like in 2025, or does that look dramatically different than what it looked like in 2019?
Well, I think it does. And interesting enough, we actually we call the effort Network 2026, and that's
off by one.
Yeah, you're only off by one. It has a number of pillars associated with it, but Patty and I were just talking today about a number of things along these fronts. And what was interesting as we were talking through it, we have a presentation to the board of directors on this in a few weeks. We were asking each other, do you think we're using the word transformational too much here? Everything we were talking about this is going to transform how we do this. And I actually think the answer, Tom, is no. I think we're using it just the right amount. Not to get too, esoteric here, but, it isn't lost on anybody within Boston Scientific that at the end of the day, right, we make medical devices that save lives. Our products have to be where patients need them, when they need them, or, bad things happen. I always tell my kids, right, we're not going out and grabbing healthy people off the street and implanting devices in them. These people have fundamental health issues that they look to us. Maybe they look to their doctor and their doctor looks to us to help resolve. And so as such, yeah, there's a global pandemic. Yeah, there's a global supply chain challenge, right? Yeah, freight and labor and sourcing are all challenges, but so what, right? People are still getting sick, and so we have to figure out how to change this. And I don't think that the changes that need to be made are incremental. We've got to fundamentally think about some things differently, like where we build it, how we buy components, how we move stuff around the world, or there are very real life implications far beyond, the P&L statement. So it's going to be a lot different by 2026. We got a roadmap. My guess is there'll be a couple of forks in the road where we'll turn left or right that we don't see yet as things come about. But I like our strategy as we sit here today.
Fantastic. Well, that's, I think, a really strong point to end on. I learned a lot and continue to find supply chain even more fascinating than I did at the start of the conversation. So thank you both for your time and insights today.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Glad Dad, Chris Newmarker, #GladDad. Where can folks find you on social media other than under the Glad Dad, #GladDad thread, I guess is the term.
Don't start a new nickname for me, Tom. I don't want that.
You don't want that. All right.
Unless,
we'll drop Glad Dad.
Unless I could parlay into it, like if I get
Would you rather be Sad Dad?
I know Glad Dad sounds get some, maybe I can get like a lifetime supply of some brand of snacks and beer because I become their spokesperson.
Well, instead use hashtag DTWest 2022,
there we go.
That'll give you all the information about Device Talks West, which is happening on October 19th and 20th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. Our agenda is up. We're announcing our speakers now. And we're looking forward to meeting all of you in Santa Clara. So
it's a great lineup. I mean, like having someone like Intuitive, CEO Gary Gotthard there, and just really really awesome. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be there.
I'm grateful to all the companies that are participating: Penumbra, Shockwave, Abbott, Boston Scientific,
Outset Medical.
Medical.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll have a lot of different companies sort of sharing their insights on product development and on operations. We'll have great panels with some of the CMOs and medical professionals at the larger companies talking about their input on R&D.
You got to be there or be square.
Just say that. That sums it all up. I'll stop talking because you're right.
Yeah.
If you're not there, then you are square.
If you want to be cool like us, you got to be there.
Hashtag cool dads.
Cool dads. Right. There we go.
All right. Where are you on social media, Chris Newmarker?
You can find me on Twitter at Newmarker. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker. So yeah, always happy to, chat with people, find out about new cool things.
Fantastic. And I am on Twitter at MedTechTom, on LinkedIn, Tom, Salemi. We want people to do what with this podcast, Chris Newmarker?
Get a like, follow, subscribe.
Please do all of those things. And as I mentioned at the top and in a previous message, we those who liked, followed, and subscribed on the to SoundCloud through and listened through their Apple podcast, they didn't receive their episodes last week. I don't know why I didn't go through, but we fixed the glitch, and that should be solved. So if you haven't already looked past, you'll see a Stryker Talks episode that went out last week, and you'll see last week's Device Talks Weekly, which included interviews with Clearly and Heartflow. So
you replaced the Apple posting hamster we had, like rest in peace, Chewy.
That's right. I think I tripped over the Apple wire in the podcast room and just pulled it right out of the wall. Yeah, I'm so clumsy, Chris Newmarker. It's just insane. So. All right. So make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you'll get Stryker Talks, Intuitive Talks, and Device Talks Weekly on that channel. And of course, subscribe to Medtronic Talks. They have their own channel and a lot of great content going that way as well. We'll have a new episode coming out 2 weeks.
A wealth of medtech and med device information. Veritable flood of it.
It's a torrent. You're right. Flood, torrent, whatever, gusher. Lots of great stuff coming your way. So, all right. That is a wrap. Chris Newmarker, good to have you back. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. Tune in next week. We'll have another episode of this podcast sent directly to you.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Talking soon.